Baylor and the Big 12 are beating the SEC powerhouses in the recruiting that matters. The guys we already know can play. Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, the evening edition brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day because it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team today and every day. Today, we're looking at recruiting, specifically in the transfer portal. I'm going to have Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12 on the show later to talk about a Baylor recruit, a quarterback that they nabbed from the SEC, and talk to you about the interest that you might not have heard of, which makes that pull for Walker White even more impressive for the Bears. But I'm going to look at it from like a broader standpoint here. If you look at high school recruiting, that's always going to lean SEC, Big Ten powers. Let's call a spade a spade. Big 12 is not going to eliminate the powerhouses of those conferences in terms of high school recruiting. The good news is the portal is as crazy as ever. And in the eyes of a lot of coaches and a lot of analysts and a lot of us fans, the portal in 2025 is probably more important than high school recruiting. Should it be that way? Well, we can argue all day till the cows come home here in the Truck Stop Conference. I think there still needs to be a good balance and a good foundation built from your high school recruiting classes. And I do still believe in the long run, the teams that are going to be successful year in, year out are going to have good high school recruiting classes that they are able to retain at their schools. But the proof is in the pudding, guys. Like, you need to hit the portal and hit it hard to win big time in college football. I mean, let's look at the Rose Bowl last week. Some would say the two best teams remaining in college football, Oregon number 1, Ohio State had dropped to number 8, but we're right in the top 5 all year long. Their two quarterbacks were both transfer portal guys. Let's look back to last year and into the SEC, the college football playoff semifinal, where there was a controversial no call, a correct no call at the end of the game between Washington and Texas that would have won the Longhorns the game. That was Quinn Ewers, Ohio State, to Adonai Mitchell, Georgia, both portal guys in the biggest play of the season. Unless we forget the national championship matchup from last year, Washington and Michigan. That was the All-Indiana Bowl. Both starting quarterbacks started their careers at Indiana. So, yeah, the foundation of a team still needs to be pretty good from the high school recruiting. But to win at the very highest level, you've got to win in the transfer portal. And I've just used a couple of examples of Big Ten powerhouses, not including Washington at the time, and some SEC powers there in Texas. But if you look at the way things are trending now, the Big 12 is starting to become a more desirable landing spot in the transfer portal than some of the big programs in the SEC and the Big Ten. Going by On3's top 20 rankings of the top 20 portal classes here so far in 2025, there are 5 SEC schools in the top 20. There are 6 Big 12 schools. And number 2 on all the lists is Texas Tech, a team that doesn't even win conference championships in the Big 12, mostly also rans in the Big 12. Oh, and you want to talk about also rans, Houston's in that top 20, Baylor's in that top 20, TCU is the highest ranked recruiting class out of high school, but Kansas and Colorado also in that top 20, Kansas State in that top 20. None of the teams that even won the conference this year are battling it out with the SEC, and for a lot of them, beating out these SEC teams. In fact, Baylor has a better portal class than Notre Dame, which is in the semifinals. South Carolina, a team that is a hot pick to be in the top 10 for next year. They're 7 spots higher than Ohio State. I mean, like, we're talking about the cream of the crop, or what we're going to perceive to be the cream of the crop next year. They're way ahead of SMU, albeit an ACC team, but a college football playoff team. Way ahead of Clemson, another ACC college playoff team. 20 spots higher than Penn State, a Big Ten playoff team. So if this is where the game is going towards, hey, the teams that do the best in the transfer portal are going to be the ones that are there at the end, we're going to see a lot more Big 12 flavor here in the next couple of years. And I know there are some programs out there that are more or less ditching high school recruiting because they can go out and buy a guy in the portal and you know that he can play college football. And the Big 12 is becoming a pretty good landing spot for this. And let's look at some of the impact players. You know, you saw Cam Scatterbo dominate that college football playoff game, put Arizona State on his back, and but for a terrible missed call, probably advances to the Final Four. Portal guy, Sacramento State. Or how about the Heisman Trophy winner? It's a different circumstance, but he's a portal guy. How about probably the top two quarterback prospects in the draft? But let's look at the one from the Big 12, portal guy. But also, hey, Cam Ward at Miami. Let's all things being equal here, he's a portal guy too. Went to the ACC, didn't go to the Big Ten, didn't go to the SEC. So as much as the SEC will get more of the 4 or 5 stars out of high school, it's trending towards the Big 12 having just as many of the 4 or 5 star guys when they're in college. And this is, I do need to put context into this. The fact that there are 6 top 20 teams in the portal rankings for On3 is amazing because anytime anybody goes from another conference to the Big 12, their portal rankings drop. Their stars in the portal, it drops. Their score drops. And yet here's Texas Tech blowing away just about everybody else in the Big Ten and the SEC. And Kansas, Colorado, and Baylor are way ahead of these big-time powers. Like Ohio State and Penn State. We didn't even get to UT. They're just crushing them, blowing them out of the water in the transfer portal. They have the eye for talent. So it is becoming a pretty good spot if you are looking for a chance to play at a high level, play in the college football playoff, win the Heisman Trophy, and be legends at your school. It's probably a better idea to go to the Big 12. Adonai Mitchell leaves a program that was, the 2-time defending national champs so that he can play in the college football playoff. Georgia wasn't in the playoff the next year. Texas was. And it is worth noting that Texas just goes into SEC year 1, Big 12 roster, and runs that thing. Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs has made a great point in the past of, look at all these teams, the 3 of the 4 teams that have gone from the Big 12 to the SEC recently in the last 10 or 12 years here, all had like their best seasons the last 20 years, their first year in the SEC. UT going to the playoff, probably the best season they've had since 2005 when they won the national championship in the Big 12. Missouri goes to the SEC championship. A&M has a Heisman Trophy winner, win 10 games, beat Alabama. These Big 12 teams, all they do is just go to the SEC and win, except for Oklahoma. We don't claim them. Don't claim them. It's a Big 8 team. But this just goes to show that when guys have played in college football before and they're not completely, swooned by the lore or what ESPN tells them is a great program, when that's not all of it, when it's not all about big paychecks and what the college game day guys are going to say about you, when it's about football and development and winning and going to the NFL, these guys who don't want to be BS'd anymore, like the high school kids do, they're picking the Big 12. They're not picking the big-time powers in the Big Ten and the SEC. And of course, there are some big money exceptions to that, right? Will Howard goes from the Big 12 to Ohio State. But you see that these guys who just want to buckle down and win games and develop as players, they're going to the Big 12 now. Maybe, just maybe. That's why Joel Klatt said The SEC running roughshod over everyone is a dead bygone era. Maybe. Speaking of the SEC, we'll tell you how one of their blue chip quarterbacks ended up at a little private school in the Big 12, even though he had plenty of interest around the SEC. It's me and Locked On Big 12's Drake Toll breaking that down for you coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let me ask you this. Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about that you're paying for twice? Because it definitely happened to me. All right, I had a few subscriptions I didn't realize I was still paying for. I wasn't really using them, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps you lower those bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place: subscriptions, spending habits, even the goals you want to hit this year. It's got over 5 million users, saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. That could be up to $740 a year back in your pocket. For me, it was a subscription tracker, which I can't say, but I love to use. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore. You know, the free trials you forget to cancel in a week. They help me out big time with that. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Oh, you didn't hear me? One more time. rocketmoney.com/lockedon.
Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. The Big 12 just robbed the SEC of a blue chip quarterback, the Little Rock, Arkansas native Walker White, who chose Auburn out of high school as a borderline five-star depending on who you ask, and now he's a Baylor Bear.
Mm-hmm. How about the number 3 dual threat quarterback in the class when he came out of high school? So
pretty good.
It might need to be a composite 5-star, but we're talking about a top 5 guy as a dual threat, which is more than one threat, Drake. So to me, that pretty much projects as one of the best quarterback recruits in America. And this is a big get for Baylor. He's not going to start next year. In fact, he probably won't see a ton of time because they bring back Sawyer Robertson, who I think is the best returning quarterback in the conference. But it gives him an avenue to know, hey, I'm going to be the starter in 26, almost certainly. I'm going to go and learn under this guy the same way that Sawyer Robertson did in 2023 and became one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 after that. So you come in, you play, again, an exciting Jake Spavital offense, one that's going to let you sling it quite a bit. And lest we forget, Baylor was on his list like in the final 5 when it came to his initial college decision. In fact, in final 3, it was Clemson, Auburn, and Baylor. They were pretty late to the party. This was the Novosad debacle, and they had to kind of get in on some 2024 quarterbacks. And I was worried when his name came up that he would go to Houston because of the Sean Bell connection. But it turns out he's just a big Baylor guy. Just a big Baylor guy.
I had Austin Novosad on Locked On Baylor twice. And he looked me in the eye and said, I can't wait to be a Baylor Bear. And has he gotten a snap? Has he gotten a snap at Oregon? What does this say about the SEC? You took a 97 rated player. He will be the second highest rated recruit in Baylor football history from a quarterback standpoint, at least. What does this say about the SEC that a school like Auburn just lost him?
I think it's bigger than SEC fans realize. Because, you know how this works. There will be Auburn fans that will say, oh, I wasn't really our future. We love Deuce Knight, and Deuce Knight's one of the biggest recruits they've ever gotten. So maybe there's some truth to that. But when this thing started, I thought I had the ESPN thought of like, yeah, but there are SEC teams looking for quarterbacks too, looking for young quarterbacks, quarterback depth. I'm talking schools like Alabama and Ole Miss. And Georgia might be looking for one now with Jaden Rashada out. So there was certainly some interest from the SEC. We didn't hear about it because Walker White wasn't one of those guys who, tweeted out every place that he got an offer and interest from. But certainly there would have been some SEC schools being like, hey, Walker, you can go be Baylor's backup or you can come be Ole Miss's backup with Lane Kiffin. And so to know that, to have that context and have him pick Baylor is big for obviously our program and for the Big 12, because if this kid comes in and stars, it's going to prove that, hey man, you can come into this conference and make a real name for yourself. Because again, let's point to the guy who's starting over him this year. Sawyer Robertson started in the SEC. He was a backup in the SEC, one of the biggest recruits Mississippi State had ever gotten. And he doesn't see much time there, much like Walker White at Auburn. He comes into a school like Baylor, and now he's got a real shot. Like Sawyer Robertson will go into next year with some Heisman hype if he plays well early in the season against those big opponents. And if Baylor wins 10 games, they're in the college football playoff discussion. And that's not a crazy leap. I know there are people who will be thinking that. It's not a crazy leap. And so Walker White sees that blueprint and could set a blueprint himself for SEC or Big Ten guys that think, I'm 4 or 5 stars out of high school. I got to go to the SEC. Whereas you look at a success story like Sawyer Robertson's or possibly Walker White's, or I don't know, the Heisman Trophy winners, and you say, I can make a name for myself in this conference and we can win big things in this conference.
Cam Scatterbo.
Cam Scatterbo.
Move
up, but yeah.
Move up, but there are other guys. There are guys who moved around that I would use as examples showing that the Big 12 is attracting the best athletes from the FCS or the mid-major level. And as you mentioned, the best athletes from the SEC level. You're getting the best of both worlds in the Big 12, it's like a purgatory, a transfer portal purgatory. Okay, you didn't get yours at an SEC school. Come here. Come compete, former 5-star. You're still just as athletic. Utilize this conference as a vessel. And hey, you were the best player at North Dakota State last year. Come be the starting linebacker at Kansas State, or come be the starting linebacker at Texas Tech.
Or, you're a JUCO tackle machine at linebacker, Keaton Thomas. You wanted to prove to people that you could play Power 4. How about you now come to us and be an all Big 12 linebacker year one? Yeah. It's all over. It happens every year, man. You look up that all Big 12 list or look at those guys playing in the Big 12 championship game, and their fingerprints are all over it, this blueprint that we're talking about.
Money. How much it seems like Baylor's got a lot of it. How much of this is money when it comes to not just Walker White, but the transfer portal additions in general for the Bears?
I think it's...
they didn't necessarily have to outbid an SEC team, but the money was at least comparable, if not outbidding SEC schools that wanted White.
Yes, and I think what it comes down to with everyone in the Baylor transfer portal is that it's not like a huge percentage of the decision, like a massive percentage of the decision went into money, because Baylor's not handing out a couple $1 million like some of these other schools are. But I think Baylor having a sign of intent of yeah, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you $500,000. Yeah. Come in, because they are getting those guys who are making those next steps up. I mean, guys from, Alabama doesn't count with Kobe Prentice, but Fresno State and FIU. And I talk about Keaton Thomas from JUCO, or Ashton Hawkins, their third leading receiver from Texas State. These guys where you say you're not making any money there. We're going to show that we want you to come play. We can't offer you $1 million, but we can offer you $400,000. You're not getting that at Texas State or whatever the number is, right? You can come in here and star, and yes, we will show you that we want you here by paying you. And they certainly did it with a starting quarterback this year that didn't work in DeQuan Finn. The numbers I heard were nearing $1 million. And so it is something where it's definitely a part of it. You can't sit here and say it's not a part of it, but Dave Aranda certainly has an impact in terms of the relationships that he and his coaches make with these players. And now you throw in a money aspect too, and a promise that, hey, we can win some games, unlike a couple of years ago. It certainly helps. So yeah, you're not going to win a bidding war against the SEC powers. Baylor's not there. In fact, there are very few teams in the Big 12 that I think can do that. But the commitment to actually going towards NIL, and that's the same for schools like TCU and Oklahoma State as well.
I'll leave you with this,
please.
DeQuan Finn. Which is probably the best way that I can ask that question.
Yeah. This is not a knock, but his best place is probably somewhere like the MAC, where he's going again. He's the MAC Player of the Year. It was something that, in terms of optics, Baylor probably needed to do. I do sympathize with this. They're coming off a 3-9 season. The quarterback leaves. I don't think not just the fans, but the coaching staff knew what they had in Sawyer Robertson at that point. And it was like, you need to go out and get a guy that can lead this team and give some excitement to the fans and the donors, and saying that this is going to get better. We got this kind of guy, again, he's not coming from the SEC, but I give you the MAC Player of the Year. I give you this pretty cool highlight tape and we pay him $700,000 to come here. Like, that's probably something like that needed to happen. And unfortunately, out of it, I think they probably needed to start him at the beginning of the year because of that price tag. But I guess it's all's well that ends well, truly, with finding out that Sawyer Robertson is a legit awesome quarterback.
He's good at what he does. It was his mom's birthday recently. I want to wish her happy birthday, the entire family. Hope they had a fun and safe. But my birthday month.
Get you a hog hat.
Is in January.
The whole family a hog hat.
The Blind Side.
Yep.
Turns out they were not great people. They were not great people.
Can you believe it?
Yeah. I believe when they filmed that, Nutt was the head coach at Ole Miss.
Yes.
But
right? Yeah.
It was Ed Orgeron who had, and I believe he may have been fired by the time the movie was released. Ed Orgeron had to wear the Ole Miss shirt because for historical accuracy, and Nick Saban was in an LSU shirt. That's crazy.
People forget.
Lou Holtz, South Carolina.
With real feathers.
In the movie. And is it Pat Dye?
No, it's probably Tuberville at Auburn.
Is it Tuberville?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He was the coach in 2004 when they were undefeated.
That feels right. Wow.
That's Senator Tuberville to you.
What a cast of characters. And then, that's it. That's all.
Tommy Tuberville and Craig James, the only Republicans that could lose in Lubbock.
That's Cameron Stewart. I was telling somebody the other day about the time that Mike Leach put that guy in the closet.
Craig James' son. Yes. Yes.
It's just like, you got a concussion? I don't know. Put him in a closet for 12 hours. Just
get. And I imagine like 30 seconds later, he turns around from the drill. Are you not in the damn closet yet? Why are you here not in the closet? Oh man, long live Mike Leach, man.
Like, we gotta fire him now, right? Like, we probably have to be putting.
Leach comes into the office. He's like, "For what? The closet thing? Really?
Concussed. He's got to go to a dark room.
I'm just trying to help the kid out." God, I love Mike Leach, man.
At Real Cameron Stewart, or subscribe with Locked On Baylor wherever you find your podcast and on YouTube. This has been, it always will be, Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A Locked On Baylor and Locked On Dose Grande crossover.